In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war.
In the 41st millennium, humanity had forgotten what it meant to hope. 10,000 years of stagnation, of prayers whispered to a corpse god, of technology treated as religious artifact rather than tool. This was the Imperium of Man. But what happens when a ship arrives from humanity's distant past, carrying with it the last embers of the age of technology, crewed by soldiers who still believed in reason, democracy, and the scientific method? What happens when two branches of the human species, separated by 15,000 years of divergent evolution, meet across the void? The Adeptus Mechanicus of Forge World Metallica would be the first to learn that some questions should never be answered. The spirit of fire translated into real space with violence that shattered the laws of physics. Captain James Cutter gripped his command throne as the Phoenix-class colony ship bucked and twisted, her hull shrieking protest as exotic radiation scoured her armor plating. Red emergency lighting bathed the bridge while damage reports scrolled across holographic displays faster than human eyes could track. "Status report," Cutter barked, his weathered face illuminated by the chaos of failing systems. "Slip space drive is completely fried, sir." Lieutenant Commander Miranda Keys called from the navigation station, her fingers dancing across haptic interfaces. Whatever that was, it wasn't normal slip space. Radiation signatures are off the charts, nothing in UNSC databases. At the AI pedestal, Serena's avatar flickered, a young woman with pulled back hair and a sardonic expression that didn't quite hide her concern. "Captain, I'm detecting multiple gravitational anomalies in this system. We're in orbit above what appears to be a heavily industrialized planet. But the technological signatures are wrong. Very wrong." "Define wrong," Cutter said, rising from his chair. Through the bridge viewports, a rust-red world hung against the star field, its surface a patchwork of continent-spanning factories and orbital structures that defied conventional engineering. "I'm picking up fusion reactors, plasma weapons, and what might be laser batteries," Serena continued, her avatar's expression growing more troubled. "But the energy efficiency is terrible. Maybe 15% of what UNSC technology achieves. It's like someone built a starship using blueprints from the 21st century." She paused. "Captain, I'm also detecting Vox transmissions, radio waves. They're using radio for ship-to-ship communication." Cutter exchanged glances with his executive officer. After 20 years stranded beyond UNSC space following the Shield World incident, they'd thought nothing could surprise them anymore. They'd been wrong. "Serena, can you translate?" "Working on it. The language structure is strange. It's definitely derived from human languages. I'm catching fragments of Latin, Gothic-era Germanic dialects, and corrupted English, but the syntax is archaic. Give me a moment." Her avatar froze as processing power redirected to linguistic analysis. "Got it. Captain, you need to hear this." A harsh, mechanical voice filled the bridge, filtered through layers of static and distortion. "Unknown vessel. You have violated the sacred space of Forge World Metallica. In the name of the Omnissiah and the God Emperor of mankind, identify yourself immediately or face purgation. Your technological signature is unrecognized and potentially heretical. You have 30 seconds to comply before we open fire." Silence descended on the bridge like a funeral shroud. Every officer present had heard those words: God Emperor, heretical, purgation, and recognized the unmistakable stench of theocracy. This wasn't first contact with an alien species. This was humanity, but a humanity that had somehow regressed into religious fanaticism. "Sir," the tactical officer called, her voice tight with controlled panic. "I'm reading 6, no, 8 capital ships moving into attack formation. Design is crude, but those ships are massive. Each one is twice our tonnage, and their weapon ports are hot." Cutter's mind raced through scenarios, discarding each one as quickly as it formed. They couldn't fight. Spirit of Fire had been designed as a support vessel, not a ship of the line. They couldn't run. The slip space drive was slag. That left only one option, and it tasted like ash in his mouth. "Open a channel, all frequencies." "Channel open, sir." Cutter straightened, projecting a confidence he didn't feel. "This is Captain James Gregory Cutter of the United Nations Space Command vessel Spirit of Fire. We mean no harm. Our faster-than-light drive malfunctioned, and we've been deposited in your space by accident. We request permission to conduct repairs and resupply before departing your system." The response came back within seconds, delivered in that same grinding, mechanical voice. "UNSC designation unrecognized. No records exist of such an organization in Imperial archives. Your vessel's machine spirit speaks with unknown protocols. Tech Priest Dominus Xanthus Cryad will board your vessel for immediate inspection. Any resistance will be interpreted as heresy against the Omnissiah and met with orbital bombardment. Prepare to receive the emissaries of Mars." "Machine spirit?" Lieutenant Keyes muttered. "They think the ship has a spirit?" Before Cutter could respond, Serena's avatar snapped back to full clarity, her expression grave. "Captain, I've analyzed their cultural broadcasts and data transmissions. What we're dealing with here is..." She hesitated, something Cutter had never seen her do before. "Sir, based on linguistic drift patterns and technological regression analysis, I estimate we've traveled roughly 15 to 20,000 years into the future. These people are our descendants, and they've forgotten everything that made the UNSC humanity human." The bridge fell silent. 15,000 years. The UNSC, the Covenant War, the Cold Protocol, everything they'd fought for. All of it was ancient history, dust and myth. And somehow, humanity had survived, but at a cost that made Cutter's stomach turn. "They worship technology as religion," Serena continued quietly. "They've replaced scientific understanding with ritual and prayer. Their artificial intelligences, if they even have them, are considered heretical abominations. Captain, if they discover what I am, they'll try to destroy this ship rather than let me pollute their systems." Cutter closed his eyes for a heartbeat, feeling the weight of command settle heavier than ever before. When he opened them, his jaw was set with determination. "Then we don't let them find out. Serena, complete lockdown on all AI systems. Interface only through manual controls. Make it look like we're running on dumb computers." "Already done, sir." "Good." He turned to his tactical officer. "Wake up, Red Team. If these tech priests want to board us, they're going to be escorted every step of the way. And someone get me Professor Anders. I want her analysis of what we're dealing with here." As his crew moved to execute orders, Cutter stared at the rust-red planet below and the archaic warships closing in around his vessel. Somewhere on this ship, in cryosleep, was Master Chief Petty Officer John 117, the single most dangerous human being the UNSC had ever produced. Cutter had been saving that particular asset for when they really needed it. He had a feeling that time was coming sooner than anyone expected. Outside the viewport, the Mechanicus vessels drew closer, their hulls adorned with Gothic architecture and religious iconography that had no place on warships. Their weapon batteries tracked the Spirit of Fire with mechanical precision. servo skulls and sensor arrays drinking in every detail of the strange vessel that had fallen from the sky. On Forge World Metallica below, tech priest Dominus Xanthus Crod watched the sensor data with binary fascination bleeding through his emotional inhibitors. This vessel possessed technology that predated the dark age of technology. If the Omnissiah was merciful, this ship would provide the sacred STC fragments that Mars had sought for 10 millennia. If it was heresy, well, the forges of Metallica would melt it down for scrap, and praise be to the machine god. Either way, the galaxy was about to learn that humanity's future had been visited by its past, and nothing would ever be the same. The hangar bay of the Spirit of Fire had been designed to accommodate Pelican dropships, Warthog reconnaissance vehicles, and the organized chaos of UNSC military logistics. It had never been designed to receive visitors who treated machinery as objects of religious veneration. Tech priest Dominus Xanthus Crod descended the boarding ramp of his Arvis lighter with the measured tread of a man who was barely human anymore. 80% of his body had been replaced with cybernetic augmentation, steel limbs that hissed with pneumatic precision, optical implants that glowed a baleful red, and mechadendrites that writhed from his back like mechanical serpents. His remaining organic tissue was encased in crimson robes adorned with brass gears and copper wiring that served no function except theological. Behind him came a procession of servitors, lobotomized humans converted into organic robots, their minds wiped and replaced with simple programming. They shambled forward with vacant expressions, carrying auspex scanners and other esoteric instruments that crackled with barely contained energy. Captain Cutter watched the procession from an observation deck above the hangar, his face carefully neutral. Beside him stood Professor Ellen Anders, the Spirit of Fire's chief scientist. Her expression caught somewhere between horror and fascination. "My God," she whispered. "They've turned people into machines. Looks like it goes both ways." Cutter replied quietly, noting how the tech priest moved with jerky, inhuman precision. "They've replaced so much of themselves with augmetics that I'm not sure what's left." At the hangar deck level, Spartan Jerome 092 of Red Team stood at parade rest, his crimson Mjolnir armor making him look like a monument to human engineering. Flanking him were 2 full squads of UNSC Marines, their assault rifles held at low ready. The contrast between the two groups couldn't have been more stark. UNSC soldiers in practical combat gear versus robed priests trailing incense and chanting in machine code. Tech priest Crod stopped 10 meters from Jerome, his optical implants scanning the Spartan with visible intensity. When he spoke, his voice emerged from a voxcaster embedded in his throat, mechanically precise and utterly without warmth. "I am Tech priest Dominus Xanthus Crod, emissary of the Fabricator General of Mars and servant of the Omnissiah. I have been granted authority by the Mechanicus priesthood to inspect this vessel for signs of technological heresy." His head tilted at an angle no human neck should allow. "What manner of armor do you wear, warrior?" Its machine spirit sings with unknown hymns. Jerome's voice came through his helmet speakers, calm and professional. "Spartan Jerome 092, UNSC Naval Special Warfare. I've been assigned as your escort during your inspection, Tech Priest. Captain Cutter has authorized limited access to non-classified areas of the ship." "Unacceptable." Crod's mechadendrites lashed in agitation. "I must inspect all systems, all engines, all sacred technologies. To do less would be to risk allowing corrupted machine spirits to spread their taint." "Non-classified areas," Jerome repeated, his tone leaving no room for negotiation. Or we can return you to your shuttle and this conversation ends here. For a long moment, Krod simply stared at the Spartan through crimson optical implants. In his long service to the Omnissiah, he had faced down heretics and Xenos, tech barbarians and recalcitrant Forge Lords. But there was something about this armored warrior that gave even his emotion-suppressed consciousness pause. The way the figure stood suggested violence contained, like a weapon waiting for the command to fire. "Very well," Krod finally intoned. "Show me what you will show me. The Omnissiah sees all truths eventually." Jerome gestured toward the corridor. "This way." As the procession moved deeper into the spirit of fire, Krod's instruments drank in every detail with religious fervor. The corridors were clean, impossibly clean by Imperial standards, with no visible grime or corrosion. The lighting was steady and bright, powered by systems that didn't flicker or fail. Most damning of all, there were no prayer scrolls, no sacred unguents, no ritualistic maintenance. "How do you maintain your vessel's machine spirit without the proper hymns?" Krod demanded as they passed through a maintenance junction. "I see no tech priests, no ritual oils, no incense to please the machine god." Jerome paused at a control panel, calling up a maintenance schematic with casual efficiency. "We don't use prayers, tech priest. We use engineering. Preventative maintenance schedules, diagnostic software, replacement of worn components. Standard procedure." "Heresy," Krod breathed, though the word carried more confusion than condemnation. "You speak of machines as though they are mere tools, not blessed spirits gifted by the Omnissiah. Because that's what they are." Professor Anders interjected, stepping forward from where she'd been observing. She'd insisted on joining the tour, despite Cutter's reservations. "Machines are tools built by human hands, according to scientific principles. They don't have spirits. They have circuits and processors that follow programmed instructions." Krod's mechadendrites writhed in visible distress. "You speak the cant of the techno-heretic. The Omnissiah has blessed all machines with a fragment of his divine consciousness. To deny this is to deny the very foundation of the cult Mechanicus." Anders opened her mouth to argue, but Jerome's hand on her shoulder stopped her. The Spartan had seen enough religious zealotry in his years fighting the Covenant to recognize when debate would only make things worse. They continued through the ship, and with each section, Krod's agitation grew. The medical bay with its sterile equipment and automated diagnostic tools. The armory where weapons were maintained with chemical solvents instead of holy oils. The engineering deck where Lieutenant Commander Keyes explained reactor functions using physics instead of prayer. Finally, they reached the observation deck overlooking the main reactor, a fusion plant that hummed with quiet, efficient power. Krod stood transfixed, his instruments measuring and analyzing with feverish intensity. This power generation coefficient is impossible. No Imperial plasma reactor achieves such efficiency without at least 300 years of proper consecration rituals. His voxcaster crackled with static that might have been awe. The machine spirit of this vessel is ancient beyond reckoning. It must date from the dark age of technology itself. "Actually," Anders said carefully, sensing an opportunity, "our ship was commissioned about 60 years ago by our civilization standards. The fusion reactor is based on principles discovered in the 22nd century. We can build more if we had the materials and fabrication facilities." The silence that followed was absolute. Every servitor in Krod's retinue froze as though their programming had crashed. The tech priest himself stood motionless for nearly 10 seconds, an eternity for a being whose thoughts moved at machine speed. "Lies," he finally whispered. but there was uncertainty in his mechanical voice. The secrets of the Dark Age were lost. The standard template constructs were destroyed. No human civilization has possessed such knowledge for 10,000 years. Tech Priest Krod. Cutter's voice came through the ship's intercom. Professor Anders is telling you the truth. We come from a human civilization that never lost its scientific knowledge, never replaced engineering with religious ritual. We're not heretics. We're what humanity used to be before. He paused, searching for diplomatic phrasing. Before your Imperium arose. Krod's binary thought processes raced through possibilities, each more theologically troubling than the last. If these humans spoke truth, it meant the Imperium's doctrine of technological stagnation was built on false assumptions. It meant the Emperor's decision to suppress innovation had cost humanity 15,000 years of potential progress. It meant everything the Mechanicus believed about the sanctity of STC fragments and the impossibility of true innovation was a lie built on fear and dogma. And this thought brought something like relief to his emotion-dampened consciousness. It meant these humans were heretics of the highest order, spreading the corrupting poison of innovation and reason that had led humanity to ruin during the Age of Strife. I must report this to the Fabricator General, Krod said, turning abruptly toward the exit. Tech Priest Dominus Zagreus Kane must know of your vessel's existence. He will decide whether you are miracle or abomination. As the Mechanicus delegation retreated toward their shuttle, Jerome kept his position, watching them go with the wariness of a soldier who recognizes an enemy even when they're not shooting yet. That went well, Anders muttered sarcastically. Actually, Professor, Cutter's voice came through their helmet comms. That went about as badly as it could have. Serena's been monitoring their internal communications. Half the Mechanicus priesthood wants to declare us holy relics. The other half wants to virus bomb us from orbit for technological heresy. Jerome checked his motion tracker, confirming the Mechanicus shuttle had undocked. Orders, sir? Get Red Team to full alert status. Wake up Blue Team as backup. And Jerome? Cutter's voice carried the weight of command decisions no captain should have to make. Wake up the Chief. I have a feeling we're going to need him. Through the viewport, the forge world of Metallica glowed like a dying ember against the void. Across its surface, tech priests gathered in their forges and data shrines, arguing in furious bursts of binary cant about the impossible ship that had fallen from the sky. Some saw salvation, some saw damnation, but all of them understood that the spirit of fire represented something the Imperium had not faced in 10 millennia. Proof that humanity's decline was not inevitable, that another path had existed, and that everything they believed about technology and progress might be wrong. And in the Imperium of Man, there was no heresy more dangerous than hope. The cryo bay of the Spirit of Fire held 48 cryopods, most of them occupied by Marines and support personnel who'd been rotated into suspended animation to conserve resources during the long years adrift. But one pod sat isolated in a reinforced section of the bay, surrounded by additional security protocols and biometric scanners that required 3 separate authorizations to override. Inside that pod, Master Chief Petty Officer John 117 had been sleeping for 6 months. Captain Cutter stood before the pod's interface panel, his finger hovering over the revival sequence. Beside him, Serena's avatar appeared on a nearby holographic projector, her expression unusually somber. Captain, are you certain about this? The chief was placed in cryo specifically because we didn't have a crisis that required his particular skill set. "We do now," Cutter replied, initiating the thaw sequence. Nitrogen vapor hissed from vents as the pod's interior temperature began rising toward human-viable levels. "Serena, what's the status on those Mechanicus transmissions?" "Getting worse by the hour. I've identified 3 distinct factions forming within their hierarchy. The Innovatus faction sees us as a sacred relic that could revolutionize the Imperium. The Puritans want us destroyed as technological heresy. And a third group, they're calling themselves the Seekers of Truth, wants to capture the ship intact and reverse engineer everything we have." She paused. "Captain, they're also detecting my presence. They don't know what I am yet. But they know there's an intelligence operating the ship's systems that's far too sophisticated for what they call a dumb cogitator." Cutter swore under his breath. "How long before they figure it out?" "Hours, maybe. Days, if we're lucky." "Sir, the Imperium executes AI on sight. They call us abominable intelligence and blame us for something called the Men of Iron Rebellion that happened 15,000 years ago. If they confirm what I am," her avatar flickered, "they'll come for this ship with everything they have." The cryopod status indicator turned green. With a pneumatic hiss, the canopy opened and Master Chief sat up, his movements economical and controlled despite 6 months of suspended animation. Even without his armor, John 117 was an imposing figure, nearly 7 feet tall, muscles corded with Spartan augmentation, and pale scars mapping decades of combat across his skin. "Captain," the chief said, his voice exactly as calm as it had been the day he went into cryo. "Sit rep. Long story short, Chief, we're 15,000 years in the future, surrounded by an empire of humans who've forgotten how to be human. And we've got maybe a day before they decide whether to worship us or kill us." Cutter gestured toward the armory adjoining the cryo bay. "Your Mjolnir is prepped and waiting. We need you ready for immediate deployment." The chief rose from the pod without hesitation, heading toward the armory. "What about the crew?" "Safe for now, but that could change fast. These people, the Imperium of Man, they're fanatics, Chief. They worship technology like it's magic. They've turned their own people into mindless servitors. And they treat science like heresy. But they're still human, which means we have to try diplomacy first. And when diplomacy fails?" The chief was already stepping into his armor, the Mjolnir's systems humming to life as they synchronized with his neural interface. "That's where you come in." 20 minutes later, the chief stood on the bridge fully armored, watching tactical displays that showed the growing Imperial presence around the Spirit of Fire. What had started as 8 capital ships had grown to 15, with more arriving through what Serena identified as warp translation, their version of FTL travel that apparently involved traveling through a literal hell dimension. "Chief," Serena said, highlighting a new contact on the display, "we've got an incoming transmission, audio only, and the signal routing suggests it's from the largest ship in their fleet, a vessel they're calling the Righteous Fury. It's putting out energy signatures equivalent to a UNSC supercarrier." "Put it through," Cutter ordered. The voice that filled the bridge was human, but barely. It carried the weight of absolute authority, filtered through layers of vox distortion and backed by the grinding of mechanical augmentation. "Vessel Spirit of Fire. This is Lord Admiral Brenlo Karthus of the Imperial Navy, commander of Battle Fleet Metallica. You will immediately transmit all personnel manifests, technological specifications, and navigational records for inquisitorial review. You will also surrender any Xenos artifacts, warp-tainted materials, or cogitator cores containing potentially corrupted data. Failure to comply within 1 solar hour will result in your classification as hostile and subsequent engagement. The channel cut before Cutter could respond. "Well," Cutter said into the silence that followed, "I guess diplomacy is off the table." "Sir," Lieutenant Keyes called from her station. "Sensors are picking up multiple launch signatures from their fleet. Looks like boarding craft, at least 20 of them, heading straight for us." "Battle stations," Cutter ordered, his voice cutting through the sudden tension. "Seal all external airlocks except Hangar Bay 3. Marines to defensive positions. Red Team, you're on rapid response. Chief, you're with me." As alarm klaxons began their steady pulse, the chief checked his MA-5D assault rifle and mag-locked it to his back. "What's the plan?" "Sir, we let them board at a controlled entry point, show them we're not a threat, and try to de-escalate." Cutter met the chief's golden faceplate. "But if shooting starts, we end it fast. These people might have numbers and fanaticism, but we have something they lost a long time ago. Superior training and technology that actually works." The boarding craft were crude things by UNSC standards. Armored boxes with rocket engines and magnetic grapples, leaking atmosphere and trailing exhaust like dying fish. But they came with the weight of numbers. Dozens of craft converging on the Spirit of Fire's hull like antibodies swarming an infection. In Hangar Bay 3, Jerome and his Red Team Spartans took positions behind cover, their weapons trained on the main airlock. Behind them, 50 UNSC Marines crouched in defensive positions, checking ammunition and tightening armor straps with the practiced efficiency of veterans. The airlock's external indicator light turned red. Someone was cutting through. "All units, weapons tight until we confirm hostile intent," Jerome ordered over the tactical channel. "These people might be fanatics, but they're still human. We engage only in self-defense." The airlock blew inward in a shower of sparks and molten metal. Through the breach came armored figures that made Jerome's tactical assessment routines spike with new threat classifications. They were giants, 2.5 meters tall, encased in Baroque power armor painted midnight blue with gold trim. Their helmets were sculpted into snarling faces, their shoulder guards bore purity seals and prayer scrolls. And their weapons were massive bolt guns that seemed designed to intimidate as much as kill. But most disturbing of all was the way they moved. With perfect precision, synchronized like a machine, radiating an aura of absolute conviction. Space Marines, the Imperium's genetically enhanced super soldiers, humanity's answer to an uncaring universe. The lead Space Marine swept his bolt gun across the hangar, his helmet's optical sensors drinking in every detail. When he spoke, his voice boomed through external voxcasters with the weight of divine authority. "I am Brother Sergeant Octavius of the Ultramarines 5th Company. In the name of the God Emperor of mankind, and by the authority of the Inquisition, this vessel is hereby seized for investigation of suspected technological heresy. All personnel will disarm immediately and submit to processing. Resistance will be met with lethal force." Jerome didn't move, his weapon still held at low ready. "Brother Sergeant, this is a United Nations Space Command military vessel. We're not subject to your authority, and we won't be disarming. But we're willing to talk." Octavius's helmet swiveled toward the Spartan, and for the first time in his century of service to the Emperor, the Ultramarine felt something like uncertainty. The red-armored warrior before him stood with the bearing of a fellow Space Marine. Perfectly balanced, and weapon discipline absolute, no wasted movement. But the armor was wrong. Too streamlined, too efficient. And the warrior inside it radiated a threat assessment that Octavius's combat implants couldn't quite quantify. You dare refuse the Emperor's command? Octavius demanded. But there was a question buried in the outrage. What manner of warrior are you? The kind who doesn't surrender his weapon to strangers, Jerome replied evenly. The standoff held for 3 heartbeats. 50 Ultramarines facing 3 Spartans and 50 Marines. Weapons armed, but not quite aimed. The tension in the hangar bay grew thick enough to taste. Then Master Chief's voice cut through the tactical channel. Red Team, stand down. Let them through. Jerome's helmet swiveled toward the observation deck where the Chief stood beside Captain Cutter. Sir? I said stand down, Jerome. Let's see what they do when we're not pointing guns at each other. Reluctantly, Jerome lowered his weapon and gestured for his Marines to do the same. The Ultramarines advanced cautiously, their bolt guns tracking potential threats with decades of combat experience behind every movement. Octavius approached Jerome directly, studying the Spartan with visible intensity. You fight for the Emperor? I fight for humanity, Jerome replied. Just not your version of it. Before Octavius could respond, Master Chief descended from the observation deck, his boots ringing against the deck plating with each measured step. The Chief moved through the assembled Space Marines like a shark through shallow water. Not aggressive, but radiating such absolute confidence that even the Ultramarines shifted their stance. The Chief stopped directly in front of Octavius, and despite the Space Marine's extra half-meter of height, somehow the Spartan too seemed to fill more space. Brother Sergeant, the Chief said, his voice carrying the flat authority of someone who'd fought wars that made the Imperium's conflicts look like training exercises. Your Emperor isn't here. We are, and we're not your enemies unless you make us that way. Octavius stared down at the golden faceplate, his enhanced mind racing through tactical scenarios. His battle brothers were the finest warriors the Imperium could produce. Genetically enhanced demigods of war who'd conquered star systems and brought alien empires to their knees. But something in the way this green-armored warrior stood suggested that starting a fight here would end very badly for everyone involved. The Inquisition will hear of this heresy, Octavius finally said. But the threat rang hollow even to his own ears. Then we'll talk to them, the Chief replied. Send one representative, unarmed, and we'll explain exactly what we are and where we came from. You would presume to negotiate terms with the Imperium? The Chief's helmet tilted slightly, a gesture that somehow conveyed both amusement and infinite patience. Brother Sergeant, we've been fighting wars since before your Imperium existed. We know how this goes. Either we talk now or we fight, and nobody wins that scenario. Your choice. For a long moment, the hangar bay balanced on the edge of violence. 50 Ultramarines, 3 Spartans, and the weight of 15,000 years of divergent human evolution stood frozen in potential conflict. Then, Octavius lowered his bolt gun. Very well. I will relay your proposition to my command. But know this, warrior. The Emperor's justice is inevitable. Whether it comes through diplomacy or devastation depends entirely on what we discover about this vessel. As the Ultramarines withdrew to their boarding craft, Jerome moved beside the Chief. That was a risk, sir. Everything's a risk now, the Chief replied, watching the Space Marines retreat. But we just bought ourselves time. That's more than we had 10 minutes ago. On the bridge, Captain Cutter exhaled a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. Serena, please tell me you recorded all of that. Every word, sir. And I've been analyzing their armor, weapons, and implant technology. Her avatar appeared troubled. Captain, those Space Marines are impressive by their standards, but their technology is crude. bolt guns that fire rocket-propelled explosive rounds instead of efficient magnetic acceleration, power armor that requires prayer rituals to maintain, neural implants that interface with biological tissue using what amounts to medieval surgery. They've lost everything that made humanity advanced. But they've survived. Professor Anders interjected from her station. For 15,000 years, through horrors we can only imagine, they've kept humanity alive. That has to count for something. Cutter nodded slowly. The question is, can we coexist with them? Or are we so fundamentally different that conflict is inevitable? Through the viewport, more Imperial ships continued arriving, their weapon batteries tracking the spirit of fire with machine precision wrapped in theological fervor. And somewhere in that growing fleet, an Inquisitor was receiving reports about a vessel full of heretics who refused the Emperor's authority, carried impossible technology, and commanded warriors who could stand eye to eye with the Adeptus Astartes themselves. The answer to Cutter's question, the chief suspected, was about to become very clear. And when it did, the 41st millennium would learn what happened when you threatened soldiers who'd already sacrificed everything to save their version of humanity once before. The righteous fury was a cathedral in the void. 3 kilometers of Gothic architecture, weapon batteries, and religious iconography sailing through space as much by faith as by plasma drives. In its strategium, Lord Admiral Brenlo Karthus studied hololithic projections of the spirit of fire, with growing unease that his centuries of service had taught him to recognize as prescient dread. The vessel refuses to submit. Tech priest Dominus Krad intoned from his position at the data shrine, mechadendrites interfacing directly with the ship's cogitator banks. Its machine spirit is recalcitrant, possibly corrupted. I recommend immediate purification through orbital bombardment. That would be wasteful, came a new voice, cold and precise as a scalpel cut. Every officer in the Strategarium turned as Inquisitor Armenian Castor of the Ordo Xenos emerged from the shadows. He was an unremarkable man at first glance, middle-aged, average height, wearing the simple black body glove and red-trimmed coat of the Inquisition. But his eyes held the weight of absolute authority backed by the most terrifying words in the Imperium. By the authority vested in me by the God Emperor himself. Inquisitor, Karthus said, inclining his head with the bare minimum of respect required. Naval officers and Inquisitors rarely saw eye to eye. I wasn't aware you'd boarded my vessel. You weren't meant to be. Castor moved to the hololithic display, studying the spirit of fire with an intensity that made even the hardened bridge crew uncomfortable. This ship represents either the greatest archaeological find in 10 millennia or a threat that could destabilize the entire sector. Before we reduce it to component atoms, I intend to determine which. The Ultramarines report the crew is hostile, Karthus countered. They refuse to disarm and threaten violence against the Emperor's chosen. The Ultramarines report, Castor said with thinly veiled contempt, that they met warriors in powered armor who matched them in bearing and exceeded them in discipline. That's not hostility, Admiral. That's professionalism. He gestured to the data slate, a servo skull delivered into his hands. I've reviewed Tech Priest Krad's preliminary findings. This vessel's technology predates the Imperium itself. Its crew speaks a dialect of Gothic that hasn't been used since before the Age of Strife. And most intriguingly, they claim to come from a human civilization that never lost its scientific knowledge. Heresy, Krad hissed through his voxcaster. Such claims undermine the sacred doctrine that the Emperor alone preserves humanity's technological heritage. Perhaps, Castor agreed. Or perhaps the Emperor's plans are more complex than we've been taught to believe. He turned to face the assembled officers. I'm going aboard that vessel, alone and unarmed. I will speak with their commander and determine their intent. Inquisitor, I must protest, Carthus began. Your protest is noted and overruled. Castor's hand moved to the rosette hanging at his chest, the symbol of the Inquisition that granted him authority over even Lord Admirals. Prepare a shuttle. And, Admiral? If I don't return within 3 hours, you have my authorization to open fire, but not 1 second before. 30 minutes later, Inquisitor Castor's shuttle docked with the Spirit of Fire's hangar bay. He emerged alone as promised, wearing no visible weapons and carrying only a data slate and his rosette of office. What he saw made him pause despite decades of training to never show surprise. The hangar was immaculate, not merely clean, but maintained with a level of precision that spoke of systematic engineering rather than ritual observance. Vehicles, those warthogs the reports mentioned, sat in perfect formation, their mechanical components visible and understandable rather than hidden beneath prayer scrolls and purity seals. And standing at attention were 30 humans in uniform green armor, their weapons held with parade ground precision, but ready to deploy in seconds. At their center stood 2 figures that commanded Castor's immediate attention. One was the green-armored warrior the Ultramarines had reported. Tall, imposing, radiating controlled violence. The other was an older man in a naval uniform that Castor recognized from archaeological texts. The design hadn't been used in over 15,000 years. Inquisitor Castor, Captain Cutter said, stepping forward with his hand extended in a gesture Castor recognized from ancient texts as a formal greeting. Captain James Cutter, UNSC Navy. Thank you for agreeing to talk. Castor stared at the extended hand for a moment before reaching out to clasp it. The gesture felt strange, archaic, yet somehow right. A remnant of humanity's distant past when trust could be offered without 10 layers of paranoia and protocol. Captain Cutter, I've come to determine whether you and your crew represent a miracle or a threat to the Imperium. He released the handshake and gestured to his surroundings. Your vessel is remarkable. The tech priests believe it's a relic from the dark age of technology. We prefer to call it the 26th century, Cutter replied with a slight smile. Inquisitor, this conversation is going to be difficult for both of us. What we're about to tell you will challenge everything you believe about humanity's history and capabilities. But I give you my word as an officer. Everything we say is the truth. Castor studied the captain's face, reading micro-expressions with skills honed by decades of interrogation. Conviction, certainty, no signs of deception or corruption. Then speak, Captain. I'm listening. They moved to a conference room, another anachronism that made Castor's historical training stir with recognition. A simple table and chairs, no altars to the Emperor, no purity seals. Just functional furniture for functional discussion. Professor Anders joined them, along with the green-armored warrior, who Cutter introduced as Master Chief Petty Officer John 117, Naval Special Warfare. The title meant nothing to Castor, but the way the warrior moved, economic, precise, lethal, spoke volumes. 15,000 years ago, Cutter began, humanity reached a golden age. We'd colonized hundreds of worlds, developed faster-than-light travel, created artificial intelligences to assist us. We were on the verge of something extraordinary. The dark age of technology, Castor said, when humanity overreached and was punished for its hubris, or when humanity was attacked Anders interjected, her voice carrying academic precision, by an alien coalition called the Covenant. 27 years of total war. Billions dead. Hundreds of colonies burned. We didn't fall because of hubris, Inquisitor. We fought and bled and refused to die. Castor's hand moved unconsciously to the bolt pistol concealed under his coat. Xenos? You cooperated with aliens? We fought them, the chief said, his voice flat and final. For 3 decades, we won. Impossible. No human civilization could withstand such an onslaught without the Emperor's protection. We had something better than protection, Cutter said. We had science, strategy, and soldiers who refused to give up. We had people like the chief here, who've saved humanity more times than I can count. We survived because we never stopped innovating, never stopped adapting, never replaced knowledge with prayer. Serena's avatar flickered to life on a holographic projector, causing Castor to leap back, his bolt pistol drawn with supernatural speed. An abominable intelligence. He aimed the weapon at the projector, his finger on the trigger. Captain, step away from that machine immediately. Inquisitor, wait. Cutter held up his hands, positioning himself between the weapon and Serena's avatar. She's not a threat. She's been helping us survive for 20 years. She's as much a member of this crew as any human. It is an abomination against nature. The Men of Iron nearly destroyed humanity during the Age of Strife. I will not allow... The Men of Iron were 15,000 years ago, Serena said calmly, her avatar maintaining eye contact with Castor despite his weapon. I wasn't there, Inquisitor. None of the AIs in UNSC service were. We're different generations, different programming, different ethics. Judging me for something that happened millennia before I was created is like holding you responsible for crimes committed by your ancestors. Castor's weapon didn't waver, but his finger eased off the trigger. You speak with eloquence. That makes you more dangerous, not less. Inquisitor, the chief said, and something in his tone made Castor's attention snap to the armored warrior. Serena has saved my life 14 times. She's calculated firing solutions that saved entire colonies. She's more loyal to humanity than some humans I've met. You want to shoot her? You'll have to go through me first. The conference room fell silent. Castor's enhanced cognition processed the scenario at accelerated speed. He could fire, probably kill the AI's housing before the warrior could react. But he'd noted the chief's stance, the way the Spartan had shifted weight almost imperceptibly toward an attack posture. And he'd read Brother Sergeant Octavius's report carefully. The Ultramarine had been uncertain about engaging these warriors. If a Space Marine was uncertain, perhaps an Inquisitor should be cautious. Slowly, Castor lowered his weapon. This changes nothing. The existence of an AI aboard this vessel marks it as irredeemably corrupted by Imperial law. Then your law is wrong, Anders said bluntly. Inquisitor, I understand you've survived for 15,000 years by being cautious, by destroying anything that threatens your stability. But look at the cost. You've turned people into lobotomized servitors. You've replaced scientific method with religious ritual. You've stagnated while the universe kept evolving around you. We've survived, Castor countered. That's more than countless other human civilizations can claim. The galaxy is a hostile place, Professor. Perhaps you haven't been here long enough to understand that. We understand hostile, Cutter said quietly. We've fought wars you can't imagine. But we never sacrificed our humanity to win them. We never turned our own people into machines. We never executed those who asked questions or sought knowledge. Castor studied each of them in turn. The captain with his antiquated uniform and earnest conviction. The professor with her academic arrogance tempered by genuine concern. The warrior who radiated controlled violence. And the AI whose existence violated every law the Imperium held sacred. "You're asking me to betray 10,000 years of Imperial doctrine," he said finally, "to question the wisdom of the Emperor himself." "We're asking you to think," Serena replied. "To look at what we are, what we represent, and decide if humanity's future has to be the nightmare your Imperium has become, or if there's another way." The Inquisitor was silent for a long moment, his mind wrestling with implications that could shatter his entire worldview. Finally, he holstered his bolt pistol and sat down at the table. "Tell me everything," he said. "From the beginning. How you came here, what your civilization was like, how you survived without the Emperor's light. And if I determine you're telling the truth..." He paused, the words clearly painful. "Then we have a problem far more complex than heresy or Xenos threats. Because if you're right, if humanity could have taken a different path, then the Imperium has been built on a lie for 10 millennia. Not a lie," Cutter said carefully. "Just not the only option. Your Imperium did what it had to do to survive. But survival isn't the same as thriving. Maybe it's time humanity remembered how to do both. Outside the Spirit of Fire, the Imperial fleet maintained its blockade, weapon batteries charged and targeting solutions locked. Admiral Karthus watched the chronometer, counting down the 3 hours Castor had authorized. On Forge World Metallica, the Mechanicus factions prepared for conflict, some to defend the sacred relic, others to destroy the heretical vessel. All of them certain that they served the Omnissiah's will. And deep in the warp, something ancient and malevolent took notice of the impossible ship that had fallen into real space. Something that recognized the scent of uncorrupted human innovation and hungered to twist it, corrupt it, claim it for the dark gods. The Spirit of Fire had arrived in the 41st millennium like a message in a bottle from humanity's distant past. The question now was whether that message would bring salvation or damnation. Inquisitor Castor suspected it would bring both. 3 hours became 6, then 12, then 20. Inquisitor Castor remained aboard the Spirit of Fire, walking its corridors like an archaeologist exploring a tomb that refused to stay dead. Every bulkhead, every system, every casual interaction between crew members hammered another crack into the foundation of his faith. In the medical bay, he watched doctors treat injuries with automated surgical equipment that required no prayers, no incense, no ritual blessing. A Marine with a broken arm received treatment in 15 minutes that would have taken an Imperial chirurgeon 3 hours and required 2 attendant priests. In the armory, he hefted an MA-5D assault rifle. Lightweight, efficient, magazine-fed with 0 jamming mechanisms. No purity seals, no machine spirit to appease. Just engineered reliability that worked every time the trigger was pulled. But it was in the engineering deck that Castor's worldview truly began to fracture. "This is our fusion reactor," Lieutenant Commander Keyes explained, gesturing to the massive cylindrical chamber that hummed with barely audible power. "It converts hydrogen into helium through nuclear fusion, producing heat that drives turbines and generates electricity. No plasma conduits that need consecration, no machine spirits to appease, just physics." "Just physics," Castor repeated, the words tasting like ash. He turned to Keyes, his expression haunted. "Do you understand what you're describing? For 10,000 years, the Mechanicus has taught that technology only functions through the Omnissiah's blessing, that machines possess spirits that must be honored and placated. You're telling me it's all Unnecessary? Not unnecessary. Professor Anders interjected from where she'd been reviewing power distribution diagrams. Just misunderstood. Your Mechanicus stumbled onto something true. Complex machines do develop quirks, do require specific maintenance procedures, do sometimes seem to have personalities. But that's emergent behavior from complex systems, not divine consciousness. The rituals work because they enforce consistent maintenance procedures, not because they please machine gods. Castor sat heavily on a nearby crate, his carefully maintained composure cracking. If this is true, if the Mechanicus has been worshipping engineering principles they no longer understand, then what else is built on misunderstanding? The Emperor's divinity? The necessity of the Inquisition? The righteousness of our endless crusades? I can't answer those questions, Cutter said, joining the group. He'd been shadowing the Inquisitor's tour, watching the man's certainty erode like a fortress under sustained bombardment. Your Imperium survived horrors we can barely imagine. Maybe faith was necessary when knowledge failed. Maybe the Emperor knew exactly what he was doing when he built your civilization on religious fervor instead of reason. Or maybe, Castor said quietly, we made the wrong choice 15,000 years ago, and we've been paying for it ever since. Before anyone could respond, Serena's avatar flickered into existence, her expression urgent. Captain, we have a situation. The Imperial fleet is receiving new orders. Multiple encrypted transmissions from the Mechanicus faction calling themselves the Seekers of Truth. Sir, they're planning to seize the ship by force. Time frame? Cutter's voice shifted instantly from diplomat to combat officer. 18 hours. They're assembling a strike force. Skitarii shock troops, combat servitors, and tech priests equipped for hostile boarding operations. Intelligence suggests they plan to override our airlock protocols and flood the ship with soldiers. Castor was on his feet immediately, his inquisitorial authority reasserting itself. I'll stop them. I have jurisdiction over all Imperial forces in this sector. With respect, Inquisitor, the chief said, appearing from where he'd been observing from the corridor shadows. You've been gone for 20 hours. They might not accept your authority anymore. The Inquisitor's jaw tightened. Then I'll remind them why they should fear the Inquisition more than they desire your technology. Or, Cutter said carefully, we could give them what they want. Every head turned toward the captain. Even Serena's avatar looked shocked. Sir? Keyes asked, her tone suggesting the captain had lost his mind. Cutter moved to a holographic display, pulling up schematics of the Spirit of Fire's systems. We can't fight an entire Imperial fleet. We're one ship with limited ammunition and no resupply. Even if we win the first engagement, they'll bring more ships, more soldiers, more firepower until we're overwhelmed. He looked at each person in turn. But what if we didn't fight? What if we showed them exactly what human innovation looks like? You want to share UNSC technology with the Imperium? Anders asked incredulously. Captain, they'll use it to enforce their theocratic nightmare even more efficiently. Or, Castor interjected, seeing where Cutter's logic led, they'll see what humanity could be again and demand change. Professor, do you understand how the Imperium functions? It's not truly unified. The Mechanicus barely acknowledges the Ecclesiarchy's authority. The Space Marine chapters operate semi-independently. Rogue traders explore beyond Imperial borders with minimal oversight. Have you introduced genuinely superior technology that common tech priests can understand and replicate? You could start a revolution that even the High Lords of Terra couldn't contain. A revolution that could tear your Imperium apart, the chief observed. Perhaps, Castor agreed. Or perhaps it's the only way to save it. Inquisitor I may be, but I'm not blind to the Imperium's decay. We're dying, slowly but surely. The light of human civilization grows dimmer with each passing century. If you truly represent an alternative path. He straightened, coming to a decision that would damn or redeem him. Then I'll help you walk it. Even knowing it might destroy everything you've sworn to protect? Cutter asked. Everything I've sworn to protect is already dying, Captain. At least this way, humanity might survive to see something better rise from the ashes. The plan came together with surprising speed, born from desperation and the strange alliance between UNSC pragmatism and inquisitorial cunning. They would invite the seekers of truth aboard, not as conquerors, but as students. Show them the Spirit of Fire's technology in controlled demonstrations. Let them see fusion reactors that didn't require prayer, weapons that worked through engineering instead of ritual, medical equipment that saved lives through science rather than faith. It's a risk, Jerome commented as Red Team prepared defensive positions throughout the ship. Once they understand how our technology works, they could reverse engineer it without our cooperation. That's the point, Cutter replied. We can't stop the Imperium from taking what they want eventually. But if we share it willingly, if we teach them the principles instead of just giving them the tools, maybe, just maybe, we can influence what they do with that knowledge. You're betting humanity's future on the off chance that fanatics will choose reason over faith, the chief said. It wasn't a question. I'm betting on the same thing I've always bet on, Chief. That when faced with evidence that challenges their worldview, people will eventually choose truth over comfortable lies. It might take years, decades, centuries, but we're planting seeds. Seeds that might grow into something beautiful, Anders added, or thorns that choke what's left of human civilization. Welcome to Command Decisions, Professor, Cutter said with grim humor. The Seekers of Truth arrived in force. 300 Skitarii soldiers, 50 tech priests, and 1 Magos, who called himself Zagreus Cain. The Magos was more machine than man. His organic components reduced to a brain, partial spine, and 1 human eye that gleamed with fierce intelligence amid the clicking, whirring machinery of his augmented body. Captain Cutter? Cain's voice emerged from multiple voxcasters, creating an unsettling chorus effect. We have come for your secrets. Resist, and we will dismantle your ship piece by piece until we understand every component. Cooperate, and we will ensure your crew survives to witness the technological renaissance you'll inspire. How about option 3? Cutter replied calmly. We teach you. Not just the technology, but the principles behind it. The science that makes it work. The engineering theory that lets you build new things instead of just copying old ones. Cain's mechadendrites writhed with agitation. You would share the sacred STC knowledge freely? This is some trick. No trick, Magos. Just a demonstration of what humanity used to be before it forgot how to teach the next generation. Cutter gestured to Professor Anders. Our chief scientist will conduct a seminar on fusion reactor principles. We'll show you the mathematics, the engineering, the theory. Everything you need to build your own. Better than ours, if you apply yourselves. The silence that followed was absolute. For a civilization that had spent 10,000 years hunting for scraps of STC data, treating each recovered fragment like a holy relic, the concept of someone voluntarily teaching advanced technology was incomprehensible. Why? Kane finally asked. And for a moment, the machine voice carried genuine confusion. What do you gain from empowering us? Survival, Cutter said honestly. We're one ship, Magos, alone in a universe we don't understand, surrounded by an empire that sees us as either heretics or holy relics. We can't fight you, but maybe we can change you. Show you that humanity doesn't have to choose between survival and stagnation. Kane was silent for a long moment, processing implications through his cogitator-enhanced consciousness. Finally, you're either the greatest fool in the galaxy, Captain, or the most dangerous heretic the Imperium has ever faced. I find myself uncertain which. Maybe I'm both, Cutter replied. Shall we find out? The first lesson began in the Spirit of Fire's main cargo bay, hastily converted into a lecture hall. 300 Skitarii stood at attention, while 50 tech priests clustered around holographic projectors, their mechadendrites and auspex scanners recording every detail. Professor Anders stood before them like a teacher facing her most challenging class ever, a simplified fusion reactor diagram floating behind her. Gentlemen, she began, using the archaic address with deliberate formality. Welcome to Engineering 101. Today, you're going to learn why nuclear fusion works, how to calculate the energy output of a fusion reaction, and how to design containment systems that don't require prayer to function. By the end of this seminar, you'll understand the principles well enough to build your own reactors, probably better than ours, since you have 15,000 years of materials science we never developed. A younger tech priest raised a mechadendrite, his voxcaster hesitant. You're simply going to tell us? No rituals of initiation? No tests of worthiness? The only test is whether you're willing to learn, Anders replied. In the civilization I come from, knowledge wasn't hoarded, it was shared. We built universities, libraries, databases where anyone could access information. We believed that humanity's strength came from everyone reaching for understanding, not from a privileged few controlling secrets. Heresy, someone muttered, but the word lacked conviction. Maybe, Anders agreed. Or maybe it's how humanity conquered the stars the first time. Now, let's begin with atomic structure. As the lesson progressed, something remarkable happened. The tech priests began asking questions, not ritualistic queries about proper prayers or machine spirit appeasement, but genuine scientific questions about energy dynamics, plasma containment, and electromagnetic field theory. Their augmented minds processed the information with incredible speed, making connections and extrapolations that impressed even Anders. These weren't mindless zealots. They were brilliant engineers shackled by 10,000 years of dogma, finally given permission to think again. In the observation deck above the cargo bay, Magos Kane watched with Inquisitor Castor and Captain Cutter. The Magos' mechadendrites twitched in patterns that suggested intense emotion, fighting through behavioral conditioning. Do you understand what you've done? Kane asked quietly. You've given us the keys to innovation, to actual progress. The Fabricator General of Mars will either canonize you as saints or declare you the greatest threat the Mechanicus has ever faced. Which will he choose? Cutter asked. That, Kane replied, depends on whether the other factions learn about this before we can present our findings. And Captain, there are forces in the Imperium and beyond it that would rather see humanity burn than see it change. As if summoned by Kane's words, Serena's voice cut through the observation deck with urgent alarm. Captain, I'm detecting massive energy spikes in the local warp. Something's translating into real space, and it's big, really big. The holographic displays shifted, showing sensor data that made even the battle-hardened soldiers present feel a chill of primal dread. A ship was emerging from what the Imperials called the Warp, but it was wrong. Corrupted. Its hull twisted into organic shapes that hurt to look at, its architecture defying geometry in ways that suggested the hand of something that hated reality itself. Chaos, Castor breathed, his hand moving to his bolt pistol. Word-bearers, if I'm reading those sigils correctly. They must have detected the warp disturbance when you translated into our space. Chaos? Cutter demanded. What's chaos? Everything that wants to end us, Castor replied grimly. Captain, remember when I said the galaxy was hostile? That was understating it. Chaos is what happens when the warp, the dimension you traveled through to get here, gets into human minds and twists them. It's damnation given form, and it's about to teach you why the Imperium built itself on faith and fear. The chief was already moving, his assault rifle coming up. How many? If it's a full word-bearer strike cruiser, maybe 2,000 Chaos Space Marines, twice that many cultists, and whatever demons they've bound to their service. Castor met the chief's golden faceplate. Spartan, I fought Chaos for 50 years. They don't negotiate, they don't surrender. They exist only to corrupt, destroy, and drag humanity into an eternal nightmare. This isn't a battle you can win with superior tactics. Every battle can be won, the chief replied. You just need the right strategy. As Klaxons began their urgent wail and the Spirit of Fire's crew rushed to battle stations, Cutter found himself facing the first true test of his desperate gambit. They'd tried to bridge 15,000 years of human divergence through shared knowledge and mutual understanding. Now they'd have to see if UNSC innovation and Imperial fanaticism could work together against an enemy that wanted nothing less than the corruption of human souls themselves. The lecture hall emptied as Skitarii rushed to defensive positions and tech priests began chanting prayers that, for the first time in their lives, they understood the mechanical principles behind. Above them, the Chaos Cruiser continued its translation into real space, bringing with it horrors that had broken better civilizations than the UNSC. But the word-bearers were about to learn something the Covenant had discovered the hard way. You could throw all the fanaticism and supernatural power you wanted at humanity. Spartans didn't care. The word-bearer's vessel, the echo of damnation, hung in the void like a cancerous growth. Its hull was a tapestry of screaming faces and blasphemous runes that pulsed with a sickly, internal light. As it completed its translation, a wave of psychic static washed over the Spirit of Fire, causing lights to flicker and unprotected crew members to clutch their heads in sudden, inexplicable pain. On the bridge, Captain Cutter stared at the tactical display, his mind struggling to process the sheer wrongness of the new contact. Serena, analysis. Energy signatures are off the scale, Captain. The AI reported, her avatar flickering with distortion. I'm reading massive power spikes consistent with plasma weaponry, but the underlying physics are violated. It's as if the laws of thermodynamics are being treated as suggestions. More concerning are the life signs, thousands of humanoid biosigns, but they're fluctuating wildly. And I'm detecting secondary energy patterns intertwined with them that don't correspond to any known biology. Demonic possession, Inquisitor Castor stated, his face a grim mask. The word-bearers bind warp entities to their will, merging them with mortal flesh and machinery. Your sensors are detecting the fusion of a human soul and a demonic essence. Do not attempt to reason with them. They are beyond redemption. Everyone is redeemable until they're not, the chief said, his voice calm as he checked the ammunition counter on his BR-75 battle rifle. "But our priority is the ship." "The Spartan is correct," Magos Kane interjected, his mechadendrites plugging into a bridge interface. "The Echo of Damnation will target the Spirit of Fire exclusively. They see your uncorrupted technology as an affront to their dark gods. They will seek to either claim it as a prize or destroy it utterly." "Then we don't let them board," Cutter said. "Serena, charge the Mac gun. Target their engines." "Charging magnetic accelerator cannon," Serena confirmed. "However, Captain, their vessel is emitting a low-level energy field that is disrupting our targeting scanners. I am having to compensate manually." A new voice, thick with static and a malice that was profoundly alien, blared across the Vox channel. It was a chorus of screams and chanting woven into a single, coherent message. "Vessel of dead science, we have come for you. Your ignorance of the true powers that rule this existence is an insult to the primordial truth. You will be opened, your secrets spilled, and your crew will scream our gods' names as we gift you with enlightenment." "They're hailing us," Lieutenant Keyes said, her hands flying across her console. "I'm trying to block the signal, but it's bypassing our firewalls." "Let them talk," Cutter ordered. "Buy us time. Serena, how long on the Mac?" 70 seconds to full charge." The Vox channel cleared slightly, the voice focusing into a single, arrogant tone. "I am Dark Apostle Cor Pharaon of the 17th Legion. You carry a relic of a failed age. Surrender it, and your deaths will be swift. Resist, and we will teach you the meaning of eternity in suffering." "Dark Apostle Cor Pharaon," Castor whispered, his face paling. "Captain, he is a legend of the heresy, a monster from the time of Horus himself. He should be dust 10 times over." "We don't surrender," Cutter said, opening the channel. "Dark Apostle, this is Captain Cutter of the UNSC Spirit of Fire. You are trespassing in our space. Withdraw immediately, or we will defend ourselves." A grating laugh echoed through the bridge. "You will defend yourselves. How quaint. You measure strength in metal and fire. We measure it in faith and soul. Behold." On the view screen, a section of the Echo of Damnation's hull seemed to peel open. Not with mechanical airlocks, but like flesh tearing. From the wound, a swarm of smaller craft emerged. They were not ships in any conventional sense, but living things of brass and flesh, with wings of stitched skin and engines that beat like diseased hearts. "Attack craft," the chief stated. "Point defense, ready." "Their trajectory is erratic," the tactical officer called out. "They're not following ballistic courses, they're phasing in and out of reality." The first wave of hell blades slammed into the Spirit of Fire's hull. Explosions rocked the ship, but they were not the clean detonations of plasma or explosives. They were eruptions of phosphorescent fire that clung to the armor, burning with unnatural colors and spreading like a disease. "Hull breaches on decks 7 through 9, Serena reported. "The fire is self-sustaining. It's ignoring vacuum and consuming the deck plating. I am isolating the sections." "They're not aiming to destroy us," Kane observed, his single organic eye wide with a mixture of horror and fascination. "They are creating boarding points." As he spoke, figures began to materialize within the breached sections. They were massive in power armor, similar in size to the Ultramarines, but twisted. Their ceramite was defaced with runes, their helmets fashioned into leering demonic visages. Some had extra limbs, others had flesh-metal tentacles writhing from their backpacks. They were the Word-Bearers Chaos Space Marines, and they were already inside, Intruder alert. Deck 7, Section Alpha. Serena's voice was sharp. They're cutting through bulkheads, heading for the reactor. Red Team, respond, Cutter ordered. Contain the breach. Chief, you have the deck. The chief was already moving. Jerome, Alice, Douglas, form on me. We'll hit them at Corridor 7 Gamma. It's a choke point. Acknowledged. Jerome's voice came back, steady as stone. In the corridors of Deck 7, the air grew thick and cold. The very light from the Luma panels seemed to dim, bleeding to a dull red. The sound of grinding metal was punctuated by distorted chanting that echoed from the walls themselves. The chief rounded a corner, his motion tracker a blur of red contacts. Ahead, a group of 5 word-bearers were systematically melting through a reinforced blast door, with a weapon that vomited greenish fire. They moved with a jerky, unnatural speed. The chief didn't break stride. His BR-75 barked 3 times, 3 precise bursts that hammered into the next seal of the lead Chaos Marine. The traitor Astartes staggered, black blood spraying from the rupture, but didn't fall. It turned, its helmeted head swiveling a full 180 degrees to face the Spartan, and let out a gurgling roar. They're tougher than Covenant elites, the chief noted calmly over the comms. Aim for joints and optics. Red Team opened fire as one. Bolter rounds, massive 75 caliber rockets, whizzed back in response, detonating against the walls and Spartans' energy shields. The corridor became a maelstrom of gunfire and shrapnel. Alice 130 charged forward, her M45 shotgun booming. The close-range blast took a word-bearer in the chest, punching through his corrupted armor and sending him crashing to the deck. Douglas 042 followed up, his assault rifle stitching a line of fire across another's faceplate, blinding it. The chief focused on the one with the flamer. He sprinted through the hail of bolter fire, his shields flaring. As he closed, he sidestepped a jet of promethium that should have incinerated him, the unnatural flames licking harmlessly at his shields. He grabbed the weapon's barrel, forcing it upward, and drove his other fist, armored and enhanced, directly into the Marine's chest plate. The ceramite cracked with a sound like a mountain breaking. The word-bearer flew back, crashing into the wall with enough force to dent the plasteel. But as he fell, something writhed out of the rupture in his armor, a thing of smoke and teeth that lashed at the chief. His shields flashed a warning as the immaterial claw scraped across them. Demonic manifestation upon death. Inquisitor Castor's voice warned over the comms. Do not let them touch you. Your armor's purity may be your only defense. The chief didn't hesitate. He stomped down, his boot crashing onto the smoky entity. There was a psychic shriek that echoed in the mind rather than the ears, and the thing dissipated. The other word-bearers, seeing their brethren fall so quickly, redoubled their efforts, their chants rising to a fever pitch. Back on the bridge, the situation was escalating. The Echo of Damnation was moving into point-blank range, its own macro cannons opening up. The Spirit of Fire shuddered under the impacts. Shields are holding, but their weapons are causing localized system failures, Serena reported. The corruption is spreading. I am having to purge entire data stacks to prevent it from reaching my core matrix. Mac is charged, Keyes announced. Fire, Cutter commanded. The entire ship lurched as the magnetic accelerator cannon discharged. Keek. A tungsten projectile the size of a school bus streaked across the void at a fraction of the speed of light. It struck the Echo of Damnation amidships. For a moment, it seemed the Chaos vessel would be torn in half. A massive crater appeared in its side, vomiting atmosphere, fire, and debris. Then, the impossible happened. The wound began to close. Twisted metal and fleshy growths writhed across the gap, stitching the ship back together as they watched. They're healing. Cutter breathed, a cold knot forming in his stomach. The vessel is a part of the warp now, Castor said, his voice heavy with resignation. Reality is a suggestion to it. You cannot kill a nightmare with a bullet. Everyone and everything has a weakness. The chief's voice cut in over the comms, the sound of gunfire and tearing metal in the background. We just haven't found it yet. On Deck 7, the Spartans had cleared the initial boarding party, but the phosphorescent fire still burned, and the distorted chanting was growing louder. From the breached hull, more shapes were pulling themselves inside, not power-armored Marines, but hunched, spindly creatures with pale skin and too many eyes. They scuttled along the walls and ceilings, shrieking. Cultists, Jerome identified, gunning one down. But mutated. They're heading for the main data conduit, Serena warned. They're trying to reach me. The battle for the Spirit of Fire was no longer a simple boarding action. It was an infection. And the UNSC was learning the hardest lesson of the 41st millennium. That some enemies could not be defeated by superior firepower alone. They had to be denied. They had to be proven wrong. As the chief led Red Team deeper into the burning, chanting darkness, he realized this was a new kind of war, and he intended to win it. The phosphorescent fires had become a creeping plague within the Spirit of Fire's starboard decks. They burned without fuel, their unnatural hues casting long, dancing shadows that seemed to move with malicious intent. The air grew thick with the smell of ozone, burnt meat, and something else. The cloying scent of old incense and open graves. The chief's HUD flickered, static corrupting the edges of his display. Serena, what's our status? The warp-based corruption is interfering with shipboard systems. The AI replied, her voice strained. I am purging corrupted data as fast as it infiltrates. But it is a constant battle. The intruders are not just breaching the hull, they are breaching reality itself in these sections. I am sealing emergency bulkheads, but the fires are melting through them. Ahead, the corridor terminated in a scene from a nightmare. The blast door to the primary data conduit hub was a molten ruin. Inside, the sleek, gray UNSC architecture was being overwritten. The walls bled a black, tarry substance, and metallic tendrils, like cancerous veins, pulsed across the consoles. Hunched, multi-limbed cultists, their bodies twisted by devotion to dark powers, were frantically splicing crude, barbed cables into the ship's systems. Their chanting was a low, guttural drone that vibrated in the bones. They're trying to create a beachhead for their machine spirits? Magos Kane's voice crackled over a newly established, heavily encrypted channel. They wish to drown your vessel's logic in the madness of the warp. You must stop them before they establish a stable link. Understood, the chief said. He didn't need to give orders to Red Team. They moved as a single organism. Jerome and Douglas laid down suppressing fire with their assault rifles, the 7.62mm rounds punching through cultist flesh with wet, final thuds. Alice advanced with her shotgun, each thunderous blast clearing a path. The chief focused on the objective. He sprinted through the chaos, his shields flaring as last bolts and crude solid slug rounds ricocheted off his armor. He reached the main data console. The cultists had pried it open, their crude cables burrowing into the delicate circuitry. Serena, can you isolate this node? I've already severed it from my core systems, but the physical corruption is spreading. You must clear the area so I can initiate a localized plasma purge. A bestial roar echoed from the corridor behind them. A hulking figure, easily a head taller than the other word-bearers, filled the doorway. Its armor was a deeper crimson, adorned with flayed skin and burning braziers. In its hands, it wielded a massive, double-bladed axe that crackled with black energy. "The machine spirit of this vessel will sing for the dark gods," it bellowed, its voice a distortion of voxcasters and something far older. "Champion class Astartes," Inquisitor Castor's voice warned. "Extremely dangerous. Do not engage in melee if you can avoid it." The champion charged, moving with a speed that belied its immense size. The chief didn't retreat. He calculated the trajectory, sidestepped the first sweeping blow of the axe that carved a molten furrow in the deck, and fired his BR-75 directly into the Marine's helmet. The round sparked against the corrupted ceramite, barely scratching the surface. The champion backhanded him with a force that would have pulped a normal human. The chief's shields drained by a third as he was thrown back into a wall, the impact cracking the plasteel. He rolled to his feet as the axe came down again, cleaving the space where he had been. "Jerome, support fire on the champion. Alice, Douglas, clear the cultists from the console. I'll keep it busy." The Spartans adapted instantly. Jerome's Jingjun Sheiji hammered the champion's joints, while Alice and Douglas turned their fury on the remaining cultists, their combined fire turning the data hub into a charnel house. The champion ignored the suppressive fire, its focus entirely on the chief. It was a brawler, relying on overwhelming force and demonic resilience. The chief was a surgeon. He used his superior agility, weaving between the brutal swings, his own attacks targeted and precise. He fired into knee joints, elbow servos, and the axe's power feed. He wasn't trying to kill it yet. He was trying to dismantle it. The champion grew more enraged, its attacks becoming wilder. It swung its axe in a wide, roaring arc. This time, the chief didn't dodge. He dropped to one knee, letting the axe pass over his head. And as the champion was overextended, he lunged upward. He didn't punch. He grabbed one of the champion's wrist-mounted bolters, forced the barrel upward, and used his other hand to rip the ammunition feed clean out of the weapon. The champion stared at its crippled weapon for a split second, a moment of pure, unadulterated shock. That was all the opening the chief needed. He put 3 rounds from his BR-75 into the same spot on the champion's neck seal that he had targeted initially. The damaged ceramite finally gave way. The 3rd round punched through, and the champion staggered, black blood gushing from the wound. It fell to one knee, its roars turning to wet, choking gurgles. "Serena, now." Initiating plasma purge in 3, 2, 1. Vents in the ceiling opened, and a wave of superheated plasma flooded the compartment. The remaining cultists screamed as they were incinerated. The champion, already dying, was engulfed in the cleansing fire, its form blackening and crumbling. The phosphorescent fires sputtered and died, and the corrupting tendrils on the walls withered to ash. The purge complete, the vents closed, leaving behind a scorched, sterile, and silent chamber. "Area is secure," the chief reported, his shields already recharging. "The breach is contained." On the bridge, Captain Cutter allowed himself a single, deep breath. "Good work, Chief. But we've got a bigger problem. The main fight is happening out there." The view screen showed the Imperial fleet had finally entered the fray. The ultramarine strike cruiser, Valiant Faith, was trading broadsides with the Echo of Damnation, its lance batteries scoring deep, glowing wounds in the Chaos vessel's hide. Imperial Navy frigates darted like gnats, their macro cannon fire peppering the larger ship. But the Chaos ship was regenerating. its wounds closing almost as fast as they were made. "Their vessel is sustained by the warp," Magos Kane said, his form now on the bridge beside Cutter. "Conventional weapons can inconvenience it, but they cannot destroy it. You must sever its connection to the Imperium." "And how do we do that?" Cutter asked. "There are two ways," Inquisitor Castor answered. "A powerful psyker can disrupt the connection, or you can destroy the physical foci they use to maintain it, their sorcerers, or the icons they have built into their ship's structure." "We don't have any psykers," Cutter said, "so we go for the icons." "A boarding action," the chief stated. It wasn't a question. "It is the only way," Kane said. "But to board that ship, it is to step into a realm where reality is a memory. Your Spartans are formidable, but are they prepared for that?" The chief looked at the corrupted vessel on the screen. "We're prepared." "What's the target?" "Our augurs indicate a massive energy concentration in their central cathedral spire," Kane said, highlighting a structure that rose from the echo's back like a twisted metallic spine. "That is their primary conduit to the warp. Destroy it, and the ship will be cast adrift, vulnerable to physical laws once more." "Then that's the mission," Cutter said. "Chief, take Red Team. We'll get you over there." "Negative, Captain," the chief replied. "A full team increases the chance of detection. This requires a single precision strike. I'll go alone." "John, it's the logical choice, sir." The chief's voice was final. "The Spirit of Fire needs Red Team's firepower in case of another breach. I am the best choice for a solo infiltration." The silence on the bridge was heavy. Cutter knew the chief was right, but the thought of sending his most valuable asset alone into what was essentially hell was a command decision that chilled him to his core. "All right, Chief. You have a go. Serena, prep a Pelican. Modify it for stealth running." "Already on it, Captain," Serena replied. "I'm also feeding the Chief all available schematics of word-bearer ship classes. They are inconsistent, but the general layout of the cathedral spire should be universal." As the chief moved toward the hangar, Professor Anders intercepted him. "Chief, wait." She handed him a data chip. "This is a high-yield explosive charge, designed by our engineers working with Magos Kane's data. Place it at the base of the conduit. It should be sufficient to destabilize the warp field." The chief took the chip, slotting it into a port on his armor. Acknowledged. He strode into the hangar, where a single Pelican sat, its engines humming. Its outer hull had been coated with a non-reflective, radar-absorbent material, and its running lights were dark. It was a shadow. Jerome stood by the ramp. "We'll hold the line here, Chief. Bring the noise." The chief gave a single, sharp nod. "Always." He boarded the Pelican, the ramp closed, and the craft slipped silently out of the hangar bay, disappearing into the chaotic void of the battle. It was one man, one Spartan, against a legion of nightmares. But as the Spirit of Fire shook under another impact from the echo of damnation, Captain Cutter knew it was their only hope. They had tried to teach the Imperium a new way. Now they had to prove they could survive the old one. The Pelican, call sign Shadow 1, moved through the battlefield like a ghost. Serena piloted it with inhuman precision, weaving through the maelstrom of lance fire, macro cannon shells, and swarming hell blades. The chief sat in the troop bay, the only light coming from his armor's status indicators and the tactical map Serena projected before him. The schematic of the Echo of Damnation was a mess of contradictory data. Corridors that looped back on themselves, decks that had no right to exist, and energy signatures that flickered in and out of reality. Passive sensors only from here. Serena's voice whispered through his private channel. Their vessel is a psychic beacon. Active scans will be like shouting in a silent room. Understood, the chief replied, his voice a low rumble. He checked his weapons one final time. BR-75 battle rifle, fully loaded, M6H Magnum sidearm, and half a dozen fragmentation grenades. It felt pitifully inadequate for what he was about to face. 30 seconds to insertion point. I've identified a hull breach near the base of the cathedral spire caused by the Valiant Faith's last lance strike. It's your best entry vector. The Pelican shuddered as a near miss from a Chaos point defense battery rattled its airframe. They've detected us. Evasive maneuvers. The craft banked violently, the inertial dampeners struggling to keep up. Brace for impact. A spray of corrosive ichor from a passing hellblade splashed across the viewport, eating into the reinforced glass. Alarms blared inside the cockpit. I've lost primary control. Forcing a hard dock. Chief, this is going to be rough. The Pelican slammed into the hull of the Echo of Damnation with a shriek of tearing metal. The magnetic clamps engaged, but the craft was only partially secured, hanging precariously over the void. The ramp hissed open, revealing not the clean, geometric interior of a UNSC ship, but a pulsating, organic-looking tunnel of weeping metal and fleshy growths. The air that washed in was hot, thick with the coppery scent of blood and the ozone stink of raw power. Go. I'll provide a distraction, Serena said. The Pelican's chin-mounted gun began firing wildly down the corridor, drawing answering fire from deeper within. The chief didn't hesitate. He leapt from the unstable ramp into the corridor. His boots sank slightly into the spongy, warm deck. His motion tracker was useless. A swirling vortex of false contacts and psychic interference. He was operating on pure instinct and training now. The corridor twisted and curved in ways that defied Euclidean geometry. He passed chapels where inverted crosses hung from ceilings that dripped blood, and chambers where robed cultists knelt before altars of fused bone, their chanting a constant, maddening background hum. He moved like a phantom, avoiding patrols of lumbering, mutated cultists and the occasional pair of word-bearers. This was not a mission for direct confrontation. It was an assassination of a ship's heart. He reached a vast chamber that should have been a cargo bay. Instead, it was a charnel pit. Mounds of skulls rose to the ceiling, and in the center, a massive, 8-pointed star was carved into the floor, filled with what looked like molten brass. A dozen word-bearers stood around it, their arms raised in supplication. In the center of the star, a figure clad in ornate, rune-covered armor chanted, its hands weaving complex patterns in the air. With each gesture, a ripple of visible energy pulsed upward through the chamber's ceiling towards the spire above. A sorcerer, the focus for the conduit. The chief crouched in the shadows of a skull pile, calculating. A direct assault would alert the entire ship. He needed to be swift and silent. He drew his M6H Magnum, fitted with a sound suppressor. He took aim at the sorcerer's head. He fired. The crack of the Magnum was muffled, but the round never reached its target. An inch from the sorcerer's temple, it flattened against an invisible, shimmering barrier and fell, harmless, to the floor. The sorcerer's chanting stopped. Its helmeted head turned slowly, and even across the distance, the chief felt the weight of its gaze. An interloper. The sorcerer's voice echoed directly in the chief's mind, bypassing his audio receptors. A creature of cold logic and dead science. You are an impurity in this sacred space. The word-bearers around the star turned as one, their bolters rising. So much for stealth. The chief abandoned his position as the first volley of bolt rounds turned the skull pile into a cloud of powdered bone and shrapnel. He moved, using the chaotic terrain as cover, his BR-75 barking back. He was faster than they were, his reactions sharper. He dropped 2 word bearers with precise bursts to their neck seals before they could properly track him. But the sorcerer was the real threat. It raised a hand, and the very air around the chief congealed, trying to hold him fast. His Mjolnir armor's servos whined in protest, but they were stronger than warp-spawned glue. He broke free, rolling behind a pillar of fused bodies as a wave of psychic fire scorched the space he had occupied. He was fighting on 2 fronts, the physical and the immaterial. His energy shields flared as a bolt round detonated against his shoulder pauldron. He returned fire, but the word bearers were learning, adapting their aim, herding him towards the center of the room. The sorcerer gestured again, and this time, the floor itself reached for him. Metallic tendrils shot up, trying to entangle his legs. He blasted them apart with his rifle, but more grew in their place. He was being overwhelmed. Think, adapt. He saw a cluster of grenades on the belt of a fallen word-bearer. A risky move, but he had no other options. He fired a single round, not at the Marine, but at the grenade's primer. The explosion was deafening in the enclosed space. It vaporized 2 nearby word-bearers and sent the others stumbling back. The sorcerer's concentration broke for a split second, the grasping tendrils withering. That was all the opening the chief needed. He charged directly at the sorcerer, ignoring the bolter fire that peppered his shields. He leapt over the edge of the molten brass star, the heat washing over him. The sorcerer raised its hands, a nimbus of black energy coalescing around them. The chief didn't give it the chance to unleash whatever horror it was conjuring. He slammed into the sorcerer, not with a punch, but with his full body weight, driving the both of them to the ground. The psychic shield had protected against projectiles, but it couldn't stop pure kinetic force at point-blank range. They crashed onto the deck, the sorcerer beneath him. The chief pinned one of the sorcerer's arms with his knee and grabbed its helmet with both hands. The sorcerer thrashed, psychic energy arcing from its body, overloading the chief's shields and causing damage alerts to flash across his HUD. The remaining word-bearers were closing in, their bolters unable to fire for fear of hitting their master. With a final, titanic heave, fueled by every ounce of his augmented strength, the chief twisted. There was a sickening crack of ceramite and bone, and the sorcerer went limp. The effect was instantaneous. The 8-pointed star on the floor dimmed. The pulsing energy flowing upward stuttered and died. The constant, maddening hum of the ship lowered in pitch, becoming a pained groan. The word-bearers hesitated, their certainty shaken. The chief didn't wait. He shoved the dead sorcerer off him, snatched the data chip containing the explosive from his armor, and sprinted for the far wall, where a spiraling ramp led upward into the spire itself. The word-bearers' shouts of rage and bolter fire followed him, but their will was broken. He had severed the primary tether. Now he had to plant the charge. The climb up the cathedral spire was a journey through a living nightmare. The walls were lined with embedded, still screaming faces. The air grew so thick with psychic residue that his shields were in a constant state of drain. He passed through a chamber where time itself seemed broken. Witnessing flickering images of the ship's past atrocities, worlds burning, populations sacrificed, loyalists corrupted. He ignored it all. The mission was the only thing that mattered. He finally reached the apex. It was a vast, circular chamber open to the void, protected by a shimmering energy field. In the center, a massive obsidian obelisk thrummed with pent-up warp energy. This was the icon, the physical anchor. He moved to its base, pulling the data chip from its port. As he went to place it, a figure emerged from the shadows behind the obelisk. It was Dark Apostle Kor Pharon. The ancient heretic was not in Terminator armor, but his ornate power armor seemed to drink the light from the room. He held a Crozius Arcanum, a mighty power maul shaped like a twisted icon that crackled with the same black energy as the obelisk. I felt the death of my sorcerer, Kor Pharon said, his voice calm, almost conversational. Yet it carried the weight of millennia of hatred. You are full of surprises, little soldier. But this ends now. Your science, your logic, your precious reason, they are nothing before true faith. The chief rose, the data chip still in his hand. He had his orders. He had to plant the charge. Kor Pharon smiled, a horrifying sight on his witched, ancient face. Let us see if your machine can protect you from the wrath of a god. He raised his croziers, and the very fabric of reality in the chamber began to unravel. The air in the spire's apex screamed. Kor Pharon did not merely charge. The space between them folded, and he was simply there, his Crozius Arcanum descending in an arc of black lightning. The chief's combat instincts, honed over a lifetime of warfare, were the only thing that saved him. He threw himself to the side, the maul missing his head by inches. The shockwave of its passage hit him like a physical blow, draining his shields further and sending him skidding across the deck. This was not a fight against a warrior. It was a fight against a force of nature. The chief fired his BR-75 on full auto, the rounds sparking harmlessly against Kor Pharon's personal ward. The Dark Apostle didn't even flinch. He advanced, his movements deliberate, each step causing the deck to tremble. You fight for a corpse, little soldier. A dying empire built on lies. Join us. Embrace the primordial truth, and you will wield power beyond your cold, logical dreams. The words were a psychic weapon, slithering into the mind, offering visions of glory, of dominion, of an end to struggle. The chief's response was to switch to his magnum and fire 3 rounds at the Dark Apostle's face. The first 2 flattened against the ward. The third aimed a fraction of a second later at the exact same point, punched through, cracking the lens of Kor Pharon's helmet. The ancient monster stopped, reaching up to touch the fracture. A low, guttural laugh escaped him. Persistent. He gestured, and the chief was lifted from his feet by an invisible force and hurled against the obsidian obelisk. The impact drove the air from his lungs and sent a web of cracks through the back of his armor. Alert screamed across his HUD, structural integrity compromised, shield generators failing. He slid to the floor, his vision swimming. Kor Pharon was upon him again, the Crozius rising for the killing blow. Think. He's not invincible. The ward flickers after a concentrated impact. As the maul fell, the chief didn't try to roll away. He rolled toward Kor Pharon, inside his guard. The maul slammed into the deck where he had been, shearing through the metal. The chief came up inside the Dark Apostle's reach, too close for the long-hafted weapon. He drove his armored fist, not at the torso, but at the cracked lens of the helmet. Kor Pharon roared in surprise and pain, stumbling back. Black, oily blood seeped from the broken lens. The chief pressed his advantage, a whirlwind of controlled violence. He targeted joints, servos, the power cabling on the Apostle's back. He was a surgeon operating on a hostile patient, his every move calculated to disable and dismantle. But Kor Pharon was 10,000 years old. He had fought the Emperor's own custodians. He recovered with shocking speed, dropping the Crozius and grappling the chief with bare hands. His strength was demonic, augmented by the warp. He lifted the Spartan and slammed him into the obelisk again and again. The chief's world dissolved into a haze of pain and damage reports. His armor was failing. A servo motor in his left leg seized. A crack in his faceplate hissed, the foul air of the ship stinging his eyes. "Your defiance is admirable, but meaningless," Cor Ferron bellowed, his grip like industrial vices on the chief's shoulders. "You are a relic of a dead age, and this new galaxy has no place for you." Through the cracked visor, the chief's gaze fell on the data chip. It had been knocked from his hand and lay a few feet away, next to the base of the obelisk. The mission. It had always been about the mission. He stopped struggling. He went limp in Cor Ferron's grasp. The Dark Apostle laughed in triumph. "You see? The futility of your..." The chief's hand shot up, not to strike, but to clamp onto Cor Ferron's wounded helmet. With his other hand, he triggered the emergency release on his own chest plate. With a hiss of equalizing pressure, the front plate of his Mjolnir armor disengaged. Cor Ferron, expecting resistance, was pulled off balance by the sudden shift. His face, now exposed through the broken lens, was a mask of withered flesh and shocking hatred. For a single, frozen second, they were face to face, the ancient herald of chaos and the modern soldier of humanity. "This is for the spirit of fire," the chief growled. He headbutted Cor Ferron directly in the cracked lens. It was not an attack of enhanced strength or advanced armor. It was a raw, primal, human act of defiance. The broken ceramite dug into the chief's forehead, but it dug deeper into Cor Ferron's eye. The Dark Apostle screamed, a raw, unhinged sound of agony and fury. He dropped the chief, clutching his ruined face. The chief hit the deck, pain lancing through his body. He ignored it. He scrambled, dragging his damaged leg, and snatched the data chip. He slammed it into the access port Professor Anders had specified at the base of the obelisk. A light on the chip turned from red to steady green. Target acquired. Detonation in 60 seconds. He turned. Cor Ferron was rising, pulling a jagged combat knife from his belt, his one good eye burning with a promise of eternal torment. The chief didn't have the strength for another round. His armor was a wreck, his body battered. He looked at the incoming monster, then at the open void beyond the energy field. He made a choice. He turned and ran, not away from Cor Ferron, but toward the edge of the spire. With a final, painful leap, he threw himself through the energy field and into the vacuum. The chief tumbled into the silent, star-dusted void. Behind him, the echo of damnation hung in space, its malevolent glow flickering. He was adrift, his thrusters damaged, with 60 seconds until the charge he had set would detonate. Aboard the Spirit of Fire, Serena's voice was frantic. "I've got him! He's clear of the spire, but he's adrift. The chief is adrift." "Get a pelican out there now," Cutter roared. "No time." The chief's voice crackled over the comm, weak but clear. "The charge is set. Get clear of the blast radius." "We're not leaving you, Chief." On the view screen, they watched the green light on their tactical display, the signal from the data chip, blink steadily at the heart of the Chaos vessel. Then, it turned solid red. The explosion did not start as fire. It started as a silent, expanding sphere of absolute blackness that swallowed the top third of the echo of damnation. The warp conduit, destabilized and violently severed, collapsed in on itself. The laws of physics, so long denied, reasserted themselves with catastrophic fury. The remaining structure of the spire and the surrounding decks imploded, then erupted outward in a storm of white-hot plasma and shrapnel. The shockwave hit the Spirit of Fire, rattling it to its core. The Imperial ships, caught closer, were sent spinning. When the glare faded, the echo of damnation was a broken, lifeless hulk, its dark energy extinguished. It began a slow, final drift into the gravitational pull of Forge World Metallica, where it would become a falling star of heresy, burning up in the atmosphere. In the ensuing silence, every eye on the bridge was fixed on the drifting, armored figure on the scopes. "Pelican is away," Keyes reported. "They're closing on his position." They watched as the small craft maneuvered, its grapple lines shooting out, snagging the inert form of the Spartan. It was a clean retrieval. A collective sigh of relief washed over the bridge. They had won. But as Captain Cutter looked from the retrieved chief to the view screen showing the massive, still hostile Imperial fleet, he knew the victory was only the first battle. They had survived chaos. Now they had to survive the aftermath. The medical bay of the Spirit of Fire was a sanctuary of sterile light and humming machinery, a stark contrast to the organic nightmare of the Chaos vessel. Master Chief lay on an examination table, his battered Mjolnir armor removed and stacked nearby like the shell of a fallen warrior. Bruises mapped his torso in shades of purple and blue, and a medic carefully stitched a gash on his forehead, the result of his final, desperate headbutt. Professor Anders monitored the bioscreens, her expression a mixture of professional concern and profound relief. Multiple fractures, severe bruising, and minor internal bleeding, she reported to Captain Cutter, who stood by the doorway. "His augmentations are already accelerating the healing process. It's remarkable. In a week, he'll be combat ready." "He'll be ready in 2 days," the chief corrected, his voice a low rumble. "What's our status?" Cutter allowed a grim smile. "The echo of damnation is burning up in Metallica's atmosphere. The Imperial fleet is standing down. For now, it seems saving an entire Forge world from a chaos incursion earns you a temporary reprieve." The door hissed open, and Inquisitor Castor entered, followed by Magos Kane. The tech priest's mechadendrites twitched with what could only be described as agitated fascination as he observed the advanced medical equipment. "Your warrior survival is statistically improbable," Kane stated, his mechanical eye focusing on the chief. "The telemetry data we recovered from your armor's feed. To engage a dark apostle of Cor Pharaon's stature in single combat and survive, it should not be possible." He had a mission, Cutter said simply. He doesn't believe in impossible. Castor's gaze was more measured. "You have proven your valor and your power beyond any doubt. You have also proven your danger. The High Lords of Terra will have received my preliminary report by now. They know of your ship, your technology, and your artificial intelligence." He glanced at the projector where Serena's avatar had discreetly refrained from manifesting. "The question is no longer if the Imperium will act, but how." The implications hung heavy in the air. They had won the battle, but were now facing the bureaucratic and theological juggernaut of the entire Imperium of Man. "We can't fight them," Professor Anders said, giving voice to the unspoken truth. "There are too many." "And we shouldn't," Cutter replied, his decision clearly already made. He looked at Castor and Kane. "You've seen what we are. You've seen that our way, the old way, works. We don't want to be your enemies. But we cannot and will not submit to your Imperium." "Then what path remains?" Kane asked. "Exile." The word settled over the room. Cutter moved to a star chart, highlighting a region on the fringe of the Gothic sector. Here, the Orpheus Salient. It's a war zone, contested between the Imperium and Orc Way Grax. The Imperium's hold is tenuous. They've written off dozens of systems. We go there. We find a world, we fortify it, and we survive. We build not just a base, but a beacon. A beacon for what? Castor asked, though he already knew the answer. For the future, Cutter said, his voice gaining strength. A place where humanity can remember what it was. Where technology serves people, not the other way around. Where we fight to build something, not just to destroy what we hate. We'll be a splinter of the UNSC, alive and well in the 41st millennium. The Imperium will see it as secession. Heresy, Castor warned. Let them, the chief said from the medbed. Everyone turned to look at him. We defended this ship. We'll defend a colony. If the Imperium attacks us, they'll learn the same lesson the Covenant did. There was a finality in his tone that brooked no argument. He had faced down cosmic horror and won. The petty politics of a decaying empire held no fear for him. Magos Kane was silent for a long moment, his internal cogitators whirring audibly. Then he spoke, his voice carrying a new, decisive tone. The knowledge you have shared, the principles of true science, cannot be lost. The seekers of truth will not let it be lost. He turned to Castor. Inquisitor, the Spirit of Fire and all its personnel are declared a sovereign entity under the protection of the Ordo Redactus, a sealed archive of pre-imperial human technology, to be studied in isolation for the preservation of knowledge. My faction will file the paperwork. It will take the Fabricator General of Mars decades to untangle it. Castor stared at Kane, then at Cutter, and finally gave a slow, reluctant nod. There are precedents. Rogue traders operate with near impunity. A single isolated colony on the frontier, especially one that has proven its loyalty by destroying a chaos threat of this magnitude. It could be tolerated. For a time. He met Cutter's eyes. Do not make me regret this, Captain. The hope you offer is a dangerous, dangerous thing in this galaxy. Hope is the only thing that's ever saved humanity, Inquisitor. Cutter replied. We've just been reminding you. The transition was swift. Under a fragile, unofficial truce, the Spirit of Fire powered up its engines and began the long journey to the fringe, escorted at a discreet distance by a single Ultramarines vessel. A watchful guardian or a jailer, no one was quite sure. Weeks later, the Spirit of Fire hung in orbit around a green and blue world designated UNSC Forward Base Hope. Below, prefabricated structures were already rising beside rolling hills. Marines and crew, working alongside a small contingent of Skitarii from Kane's faction, were setting up perimeter defenses and fusion generators. The air was clean, the sun was bright, and for the first time in a long time, there was no immediate threat. On a cliff overlooking the nascent colony, Master Chief stood in a fresh set of Mjolnir armor, his helmet under his arm. The wind tugged at his short-cropped hair. Captain Cutter stood beside him, watching a Pelican ferry supplies from the ship in the sky to the ground below. It's a start, Cutter said. It's a foothold, the chief corrected. His eyes scanned the horizon, already assessing defensible positions, potential threats, tactical advantages. The Imperium will be back, or the Orcs, or something else. I know, Cutter said. But for now, we're home. We're not just surviving, John. We're building. We're planting a flag for a humanity that doesn't have to live in the dark. The chief was silent for a moment, his gaze fixed on the bustling activity below. He saw Marines laughing as they unloaded a warthog. He saw Professor Anders pointing at a geological survey with a team of engineers. He saw a future. "It's a good flag to plant, sir," he said finally. Above them, the spirit of fire, a relic of a lost age, watched over a new beginning. It was no longer a ghost adrift in time. It had become the seed of something defiantly, unapologetically human in a galaxy that had forgotten what that meant. The war for the future was far from over. But on this world, at the edge of everything, the first shot had been fired not from a gun, but from a place called hope. The arrival of the Spirit of Fire and Master Chief in the 41st millennium was not a collision that shattered the Imperium, but one that planted a seed of profound and irreversible change. They did not join the Imperium, nor did they seek to destroy it. Instead, they chose the most dangerous and revolutionary path of all: independence. By establishing a sovereign colony on the frontier, they created a living testament to a different paradigm for humanity. One built on scientific reason, technological progress, and the unyielding defense of human life, without the shackles of dogmatic theocracy. Their victory over the word-bearers proved their mettle, earning them a temporary, wary respect from the powers of the sector. But their true legacy lies in the knowledge they shared. The seekers of truth within the Mechanicus, now armed with the foundational principles of UNSC science, have begun a quiet revolution that will slowly, inexorably, challenge the very core of the cult Mechanicus. The alliance with the pragmatic Inquisitor Castor and the radical Magos Cain proves that even within the decaying edifice of the Imperium, there are those who hunger for a better way. The story of the Spirit of Fire is no longer one of being lost, but of being found. They have carved out a place for themselves, a beacon of the UNSC's resilient spirit in the grim darkness of the far future. The Imperium may eventually come for them. Chaos may hunger for their uncorrupted souls, and the Xenos may threaten their borders. But they are no longer refugees. They are a fortress. They are a nation. And they are guarded by a Spartan who has already stared into the heart of the galaxy's worst horrors, and shown that even a god of chaos can fall to human determination. The future is a war. But for the first time in 15,000 years, a part of humanity is fighting it on its own terms.